In the dead heart of the Arizona desert, the town of Redemption was a place where people came to forget, or to be forgotten. Maya worked the counter at the Fork in the Road diner, a dusty outpost of lukewarm coffee and stale regrets, and she had perfected the art of being invisible. For 5 years, her life had been a metronome of routine: brew the coffee, wipe the counters, take the orders, and never, ever let anyone look too closely. She was a ghost in a grease-stained apron, and that was the only way she could stay alive. But there was a crack in her perfect facade, a small, obsessive tell. Underneath the chipped formica of the main counter was a single, dark stain, a ghost of a coffee spill from years before she'd arrived. Several times an hour, especially when the diner was quiet, Maya would take her rag and polish that spot. Not the whole counter, just that one specific circle, rubbing with a focused intensity that was unnerving if you watched for too long. It was a nervous habit, a prayer, a way of trying to scrub away a memory that was far more permanent than any stain. Maya was 29, but the fear in her pale blue eyes belonged to someone much older. Her blonde hair, the color of desert grass, was always tied back in a severe knot, as if she were trying to restrain a part of herself from escaping. The diner regulars, a handful of truckers, a few lost tourists, and Sheriff Brody had long ago stopped trying to solve the puzzle of her. They accepted her quiet efficiency as part of the landscape, like the heat haze shimmering off the asphalt outside. They didn't see the way her eyes constantly scanned the reflective chrome of the napkin dispensers, using them as crude mirrors to watch the diner's entrance. They didn't notice that she never sat with her back to a door, even on her break. What they couldn't possibly know was what lay wrapped in oilcloth and buried beneath a loose floorboard in her small, isolated trailer at the edge of town. It wasn't money or jewels. It was a gun, a custom-built Volkov V9 pistol with a grip of polished ironwood. It was a beautiful, deadly thing, a masterpiece of engineering. It was also the weapon that had murdered a federal prosecutor in Chicago 5 years ago. And it had her fingerprints all over it. This is not a story about a simple waitress hiding from a troubled past. This is a story about a carefully constructed lie coming apart at the seams. It's about how the quietest places can harbor the most dangerous secrets, and how a man who fell from the sky brought a war to her doorstep. It's the story of a woman who had to decide if the only way to prove her innocence was to use the very thing that made her look guilty. And it all began not with a bang, but with the whisper-quiet thrum of helicopter blades slicing through the dawn. The rhythm of redemption was as predictable as the sunrise. At 5 a.m., Maya would unlock the diner. By 5:30, the coffee was brewing, its scent a lonely perfume in the vast emptiness. At 6 hours, Sheriff Brody's cruiser would crunch into the gravel lot. He was a decent man, with a face weathered by the sun and a quiet understanding that some things were better left unasked. He'd take his usual seat at the counter, order black coffee and a day-old donut, and read the paper. "Morning, Maya," he'd grunt. "Sheriff," she'd reply, her voice a practiced monotone. She moved through the morning rush with a serene efficiency that Sal, the diner's grizzled owner, praised constantly. "Kid's a machine," he'd say. "Never drops a plate, never gets an order wrong." But Sal, like everyone else, only saw the surface. He didn't see the way Maya's hand would flinch towards the small of her back when a truck backfired on the highway, a phantom limb reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. He didn't notice how she could tally a complex bill in her head faster than his ancient cash register. One afternoon, a pair of bikers, drunk and belligerent, started harassing a family in a booth. Before Sal could even reach for the phone to call Brody, Maya was there. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She just stood beside their table, holding a coffee pot, and said something too low for anyone else to hear. Her eyes were flat, cold, and utterly devoid of fear. The two men, leather-clad and twice her size, exchanged a look. The bravado drained from their faces. They threw a few bills on the table and left without another word. Sheriff Brody had arrived just as they were peeling out of the parking lot. "What did you say to them?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. "I told them the coffee was on the house if they left right now," she lied, her face a perfect mask of innocence. Brody knew she was lying. He'd been a cop for 30 years, and he recognized the look of someone who knew exactly how to find a man's breaking point. He'd run her name when she first arrived. Maya Jensen. Social security number was valid. No criminal record. But the trail was too clean. It was as if she'd been born the day she drove into town in a beat-up sedan with nothing but a duffel bag. He let it go. In redemption, a clean slate was a courtesy you extended to everyone. The truth was, Maya Jensen had been born in a gas station bathroom outside of Omaha. The woman who had existed before that, Elena Petrova, a sharp, ambitious paralegal from Chicago, had died on a rainy Tuesday night. Elena had been smart, too smart for her own good. She had discovered a hidden ledger, a digital ghost in her firm's servers that detailed a vast money laundering operation for Vincent the Vulture Scarpello, the most ruthless crime boss in the city. She had planned to go to the FBI, but Scarpello's reach was long. The night before her meeting, her boss, the prosecutor she worked for, was found dead in his office. Elena was discovered by the police, standing over the body, catatonic with shock. On the floor was the Volkov V9, a gift from her late father, a gunsmith who had taught her to shoot. Her prints were the only ones on it. Scarpello had framed her with surgical precision. Knowing she would never survive arrest, let alone a trial, she had run. She took the gun, the one piece of evidence that tied her to the scene, because it was also the only piece of evidence that could save her. Her father, a paranoid artist, had a secret. He etched a microscopic serial number, a unique maker's mark, inside the barrel of every gun he made. A number known only to him and to her. A number that could prove this specific gun was sold to one of Scarpello's top enforcers a month before the murder. That night, as she wiped down the counters, the small television in the corner was playing the national news. A headline flashed across the screen. Chicago Kingpin. Vincent Scarpello acquitted on racketeering charges. A picture of Scarpello filled the screen, his face a mask of smug victory. The coffee pot slipped from Maya's hand, shattering on the linoleum floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet diner. Sal and Brody turned to look at her. Her face was ashen, her hands trembling. "You all right, kid?" Sal asked, concern in his voice. Maya stared at the broken shards, at the dark, spreading stain. "Fine," she whispered, her voice tight. "Just tired." But inside, a cold dread was blooming. Scarpello was free. A man like that didn't leave loose ends. He would be coming for her. He would be coming for the gun. The next morning, the sky broke the routine. A sleek, black helicopter, a machine that looked like it belonged in a spy movie, descended from the cloudless blue. It didn't land at the small municipal airstrip. It settled in Miller's Field, a patch of dry earth just outside of town, kicking up a blinding storm of dust. The entire diner went silent, patrons shielding their eyes as they stared out the window. A single figure emerged and began walking toward them. He moved with an unnerving economy of motion, his long strides eating up the distance. He wasn't dressed like a typical billionaire. No flashy suit. He wore a simple, dark, Henley, tactical-looking cargo pants and sturdy boots. But the clothes fit his powerful frame with a tailor's precision, and the watch on his wrist was a Patek Philippe that cost more than the diner itself. He was about 40, with short, dark hair, a ruggedly handsome face, and eyes the color of storm clouds. They were the most unsettling thing about him. They weren't just looking. They were assessing, cataloguing, analyzing everything they saw. The bell above the diner door jingled, and he stepped inside. The low hum of conversation died completely. He paused for a moment, his gaze sweeping the room, noting the exits, the number of patrons, the position of the sheriff. It was a professional assessment, done in less than a second. Maya felt a jolt of ice in her veins. She knew that look. She'd seen it on federal marshals, on SWAT teams. This man was dangerous. He took a seat at the counter, 2 stools down from Sheriff Brody. "Coffee black," he said, his voice a low, calm baritone. Maya moved on autopilot, her hand steady as she poured. She could feel his eyes on her, not in the way men usually looked at her, but with an intense, analytical focus. It felt like being X-rayed. "Passing through?" Sheriff Brody asked, his casual tone failing to hide his suspicion. "Something like that," the man replied, his gaze never leaving Maya. "Looking for something. A rare piece. Thought I'd try my luck in the smaller towns. People hide the most interesting things in quiet places." Maya's hand tightened on the coffee pot. The words felt like a direct threat. "What kind of rare piece?" Brody pressed. The man took a slow sip of coffee. "A firearm," he said. "A custom job. Volkov UY-9. Maya felt the floor drop out from under her. It couldn't be a coincidence. It was impossible. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She fought to keep her expression neutral, to keep her hands from shaking. The man's eyes flickered down to the counter, to the dark stain she was unconsciously polishing with her rag. A small, knowing smile touched the corner of his mouth. "You're very thorough with your cleaning," he observed, his voice soft. "Almost like you're trying to wipe something away." He looked directly at her, his stormy eyes seeing far too much. "My name is Kalen Vance. And you, Maya, look like a woman with a secret." The air in the diner crackled with a tension so thick it was hard to breathe. Sheriff Brody shifted on his stool, his hand moving instinctively closer to his service weapon. Sal stood frozen behind the register. Kalen Vance's words hung in the air, a direct and undeniable accusation. Maya forced herself to meet his gaze. Her training from a life she'd left behind, the hours her father had spent teaching her poker, took over. She manufactured a small, tired smile. "Everyone in Redemption has a secret, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "That's kind of the point of this place. Now, will there be anything else? Or are you just here to psychoanalyze the help?" A flicker of genuine surprise, maybe even admiration, crossed Vance's face. He hadn't expected her to push back. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "Touché. For now the coffee is fine." But the spell was broken. For the next hour, Vance sat at the counter, a silent, imposing presence that threw the diner's delicate ecosystem into chaos. He didn't just drink his coffee. He seemed to absorb the entire room. He tracked conversations, noted who came and went, and his gaze would periodically drift back to Maya, always with that same unnerving, analytical intensity. He was a hunter, and Maya felt like prey that had just been spotted. He paid with a crisp $100 bill, told her to keep the change, and left. The diner collectively exhaled as his helicopter lifted off, a black dragonfly disappearing into the sun. What in the hell was that about? Sal muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Trouble, Sheriff Brody said, his eyes on Maya. That's what that was. Maya didn't answer. She just picked up her rag and began scrubbing the stain on the counter, her movements frantic, desperate, as if she could somehow erase the last hour, erase the name of the gun, erase the man who had come looking for it. Kalen Vance did not disappear. He checked into the town's only motel, the Sleepy Cactus Inn, a collection of sun-bleached bungalows that hadn't been updated since the 1970s. The news spread through Redemption like wildfire. A billionaire in a helicopter was staying at the Sleepy Cactus. It was the most exciting thing to happen since a flash flood had washed out the highway 5 years ago. His presence became a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety for Maya. He came into the diner for every meal. He was always polite, always tipped extravagantly, but his watchfulness never ceased. He would sit for hours, nursing a single cup of coffee, his laptop open, but his attention clearly elsewhere. He was waiting. One evening, as she was closing up, he was the last one there. "You're not from around here," he stated. Not a question, but a fact. "Neither are you," she countered, stacking chairs on tables. "I'm here looking for something that was stolen from me," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "A piece of my family's history. That Volkov pistol. It was made by a master gunsmith for my father. It was stolen years ago." Maya froze, her back to him. A lie. A clever, well-constructed lie. "But why? Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice tight. "Because the man who I believe stole it was a man named Vincent Scarpello," Vance continued, his voice like stones dropping into a deep well. "And records show that the gun was later sold to one of his enforcers, the same enforcer who was the prime suspect in the murder of a federal prosecutor 5 years ago, a murder a young paralegal was framed for, a woman named Elena Petrova." Maya slowly turned to face him, her face a pale mask in the dim light of the diner. The carefully built walls of her new life were crumbling to dust around her. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm the man whose life Scarpello destroyed," Kalen Vance said, and for the first time she saw a flicker of raw pain in his stormy eyes. "The prosecutor who was murdered. He was my brother. And I've spent the last 5 years, and a considerable fortune, hunting for the one thing that can prove Scarpello gave the order. The gun." The revelation hit Maya with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't hunting her. He was hunting the same man she was. He was looking for the gun, not to implicate her, but to exonerate his brother and destroy Scarpello. They were on the same side, but their alliance was a minefield. If she told him she had the gun, she would be admitting she was Elena Petrova, a fugitive wanted for murder. If she didn't, Scarpello's men, who were surely coming, would kill them both to get it. Before she could process this, the headlights of 2 cars cut through the darkness outside, pulling into the gravel lot. They were dark sedans, the kind that screamed federal agent or organized crime. They parked in a way that blocked her beat-up car. "Looks like the party's starting," Vance said, his body instantly shifting into a state of high alert. He was no longer a grieving billionaire. He was something else, something harder. A soldier. "Scarpello's men, they must have finally tracked you." "How do you know?" "Because," he said, his eyes locked on the cars. "I've been tracking them for a week. I followed them here." 2 men got out of each car. They were dressed in dark suits, their movements fluid and professional. They weren't thugs. They were soldiers in Scarpello's army. "Stay behind me," Vance ordered, moving to stand between her and the door. "And stay down. I can handle myself, Maya shot back, her own survival instincts screaming to life. I have no doubt, Vance said, a grim smile on his face. But these men are professionals, and so am I. In that moment, Maya understood. The way he moved, the way he assessed threats, the quiet confidence. He wasn't just a rich man seeking revenge. He was a former Navy SEAL. She'd seen enough of them with her prosecutor brother-in-law to recognize the bearing. Kalen Vance was a trained killer. The diner door swung open. The 4 men stepped inside, spreading out to flank them. The leader, a man with a scarred face and dead eyes, smiled. Elena Petrova, he said, his voice a gravelly rasp. The vulture sends his regards. He'd like his property back. The gun. Give it to us, and he'll make your death quick. Suddenly, the front door was kicked open again. But it wasn't more of Scarpello's men. It was Sheriff Brody, his face grim, his service pistol held steady in a 2-handed grip. "Everybody freeze!" he yelled, his voice booming in the confined space. He wasn't looking at the men in suits. He was looking directly at Maya. "Sal called me," Brody said, his voice filled with regret. "Said there was trouble. I also got this about an hour ago." He held up a printed flyer with his other hand. It was a bolo alert from the Chicago PD, just reactivated. On it was a 5-year-old picture of a smiling young woman with blonde hair and pale blue eyes. The name printed below it was Elena Petrova. "Maya," Brody said, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm sorry, but you're under arrest for the murder of federal prosecutor David Vance." It was a perfect trap. Scarpello's killers were in front of her. The law was behind her. Her identity was shattered. And Kalen Vance, the brother of the man she was accused of murdering, stood beside her, his expression unreadable, his own agenda a terrifying unknown. She was out of time, out of lies, and out of options. The quiet life she had bled for was over, and the war she had run from had found her in the middle of the desert. The world narrowed to the space between 4 killers, a small-town sheriff, and a ghost with a gun. For a paralyzing second, Maya's carefully constructed reality fractured into 1,000,000 pieces, each one reflecting a different path to her death. In front of her, Scarpello's men, their faces impassive masks of professional violence. Behind her, Sheriff Brody, his expression a cocktail of shock and duty, his gun aimed not at the obvious threat, but at her. Beside her, Kalen Vance, a man whose brother she was accused of murdering, his allegiance a terrifyingly blank slate. Her mind, the sharp, analytical tool of a top-tier paralegal, kicked into overdrive, sifting through impossibilities to find a single viable thread. Running was death. Surrender was death. Fighting was suicide. The only option left was to change the rules of the game. "Drop it, Maya," Brody commanded, his voice strained. "Or Elena, whoever you are, just drop the coffee pot." The scarred leader of Scarpello's men chuckled. "Listen to the law, man, sweetheart. Make this easy." Maya's eyes darted to Kalen. His face was granite, his stormy gaze locked on the thugs, but she could feel the conflict radiating from him. He wanted the gun, he wanted Scarpello, but the bolo alert had just branded her his brother's killer. He was a weapon without a target. She had to aim him. "He hated cilantro," she said, her voice a low, urgent whisper, meant only for Kalen. Kalen's eyes flickered toward her, a spark of confusion in their depths. "What?" "Your brother." "David," she clarified, her gaze never leaving his. "He said it tasted like soap. He'd send back a whole meal if he found one leaf in it. We worked late on the Scarpello indictment for 3 months. I ordered his dinner every night." It was a small, useless detail. a piece of human trivia that would never appear in a case file or a police report. It was the kind of thing only someone who had actually known the man, worked alongside him, would know. It was proof of a relationship, not a crime. In that split second, she saw the calculation in Caelan Vance's eyes shift. The doubt wavered. It was enough. Now, she breathed. Then she moved. It wasn't the clumsy panic of a waitress. It was the economical motion of someone trained for chaos. She didn't drop the coffee pot. She threw it. Not at the men, but at the large glass jar of pickled eggs on the counter behind them. The jar exploded, sending a shower of glass, eggs, and stinking brine across the floor. The instant the glass shattered, Caelan moved with a speed that was nothing short of supernatural. He wasn't a billionaire anymore. He was a predator. In the fraction of a second, the thugs were distracted. He closed the distance to the nearest one, his hand striking the man's throat in a single, silent, disabling blow. The man crumpled without a sound. At the same time, Maya ducked behind the counter, grabbing the handle of a massive, sizzling cast-iron skillet of bacon Sal had left on the warmer. "Brody, get down!" she screamed. The sheriff, to his credit, reacted on instinct, dropping into a crouch as the second thug raised his weapon. The bullet that would have hit his chest whizzed over his head and shattered the diner's neon clock. Caelan was already on the move, using the first man's body as a shield as he drew a sleek, compact pistol from the small of his back. 2 precise shots, almost silent from a suppressor she hadn't even seen, and the second and third thugs dropped to the floor, their guns clattering on the linoleum. The scarred leader was the only one left. He was good. He'd ignored the distractions and kept his focus on the primary target, Maya. He vaulted over the counter as she rose with the skillet. She swung it like a medieval mace, the heavy iron connecting with his gun hand with a sickening crunch of bone. He roared in pain, his weapon flying from his grasp, but he was still coming, his other hand reaching for her throat. Before he could reach her, Caelan was there, a dark blur of motion. The fight was brutally short. It wasn't a brawl, it was a termination. Caelan dismantled him with a series of precise, devastating strikes to his joints and nerve clusters, ending with a chokehold that rendered the man unconscious in seconds. The entire violent ballet had taken less than 10 seconds. The diner was a wreck of shattered glass, spilled coffee, and unconscious bodies. The only sounds were the hiss of the skillet, the ragged gasps of Sheriff Brody, and the low hum of the refrigerator. Brody slowly rose to his feet, his gun now wavering between Maya and Caelan. What in God's name? "Sheriff, that bolo is 5 years old and based on planted evidence," Maya said, her voice sharp and clear. "Vincent Scarpello framed me for a murder his own man committed. These men were here to kill me and retrieve the evidence that proves it." "Evidence?" Brody stammered, his eyes wide. "The gun," Caelan said, his voice a low growl. "She has the murder weapon, and if her story is true, it's the only thing that can put Scarpello away for good." The wail of approaching sirens cut through the night. Brody's call for backup. "We don't have time for this," Caelan said, grabbing Maya's arm. "We have to go, now." "You can't run," Brody pleaded. "This makes you look guilty." "Staying here gets me killed, Sheriff," Maya shot back, her gaze softening for a moment. "I'm not a killer. I swear to you, when this is over, I'll turn myself in. But you have to give me a chance to prove it." She didn't wait for an answer. She pulled Caelan toward the kitchen. "This way." In the kitchen, the air was thick with the smell of grease and fear. She pointed to the large industrial gas stove. "The main valve is behind it. Give me your suppressor." Caelan, without question, twisted the suppressor from his pistol and handed it to her. She used its weight and solid construction as a makeshift wrench, forcing the rusted valve open. The hiss of escaping gas was immediate and terrifying. "The back door is reinforced," she said, already moving toward a small pantry. "But the wall behind these shelves is just drywall and siding." Kalen didn't hesitate. He slammed his shoulder into the shelving unit, splintering the wood. 2 more powerful impacts, and they were through, bursting out into the cool, dark desert air behind the diner. The sounds of sirens were closer now, converging on the fork in the road. "They'll surround the place," Kalen said, scanning the darkness. "They'll be focused on the gas leak," Maya replied, pulling him toward the shadows at the edge of the property. "No cop is going to rush a building that's about to blow." As if on cue, a spark from the damaged neon clock inside the diner ignited the accumulated gas. The windows of the fork in the road bowed outward for a split second before erupting in a roar of orange and yellow flame. The force of the explosion threw them to the ground, the shock wave rolling over them like a physical blow. They didn't look back. They scrambled to their feet and melted into the vast, unforgiving darkness of the Arizona desert, leaving behind the identities of Maya Jensen and Kalen Vance, and becoming 2 fugitives with a single, impossible goal. For 2 days, they moved through the desert, a world of rock and cactus and shimmering heat. Kalen's SEAL training was the only thing that kept them alive. He knew how to find water, how to navigate by the stars, how to move without leaving a trace. Maya, in turn, proved her own worth. Her mind was a map of Scarpello's organization, his methods, his weaknesses. Huddled by a small, smokeless fire on the second night, she finally laid out the entire truth. "My father was a master gunsmith," she explained, her voice raw. "A paranoid artist who saw conspiracy in everything. He had a secret he taught only me. Inside the barrel of every gun he ever made, he etched a microscopic serial number using a laser process he invented. It's his maker's mark, unique, untraceable without knowing where to look and what to look for." Kalen listened, his face illuminated by the flickering flames, his expression intense. "The Volkov VH9 that killed your brother has my fingerprints on it, because it was a gift from my father. But it also has that mark. I know the number by heart. It corresponds to a ledger my father kept, a record of every piece he ever sold. That ledger will show the gun was sold to one of Scarpello's top enforcers, a man named Marco Gallo, 1 month before your brother's murder." "Where is this gun?" Kalen asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Wrapped in oilcloth and buried under a loose floorboard in my trailer at the edge of town," she said. "We have to go back." "It'll be the first place they're watching," he countered. "Scarpello's men, the police." "I know," she said, "but they'll be watching the trailer, not the ground underneath it." Retrieving the gun was a masterpiece of calculated risk. They approached the trailer park under the cover of a moonless night, moving like ghosts through the familiar landscape. Kalen, using a pair of high-tech binoculars, confirmed her fears. 2 dark sedans were parked down the street, their occupants a patient, deadly vigil. A lone county sheriff's car was posted at the park's entrance. Maya sketched a layout of her trailer in the dirt. There's a crawlspace vent on the north side, covered by a prickly pear cactus. I planted it myself. The floorboard is directly above the water heater. What followed was an hour of unbearable tension. While Kalen created a diversion, a series of small, precise rock throws that drew the attention of Scarpello's men to the far side of the park, Maya slithered through the narrow, dusty crawl space. Spiders and scorpions were the least of her worries. Every creak of the trailer above was a potential gunshot. She found the spot, her fingers digging into the dry, packed earth until they found the oilcloth bundle. It was still there, heavy, solid, and cold, the source of all her misery. and her only hope for salvation. With the gun secured in a pack on Kaelin's back, they began the second phase of her plan. "My father had an apprentice," she explained, as they drove a stolen pickup truck through the New Mexico highlands 2 days later. "An old-school craftsman named Elias Thorne. He was the only person my father trusted. If anyone can find that mark and officially certify its existence, it's him." Elias Thorne lived in a fortified cabin that looked more like a bunker, nestled deep in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. He greeted them with a shotgun and a face carved from granite. He only lowered the weapon when Maya said a single code word her father had taught her: ironwood. Inside, his workshop was a pristine temple of steel and oil. Using a high-powered digital microscope, the old man meticulously examined the Volkov's barrel. After a long, tense silence, he grunted. "He was a damned fool, your father. A genius, but a fool." He pointed to the monitor. There, almost invisible amongst the rifling grooves, was a string of alphanumeric characters rendered in a flawless, microscopic script. "That's his mark, all right. Never seen another like it." He produced a sworn, notarized affidavit, complete with microphotographs, attesting to the mark's existence and its unique connection to her father's private ledgers. It was the second piece of the puzzle. The gun was now undeniably linked to its creator, but they still had to link it to the killer. "The final piece is the hardest," Maya told Kaelin, as they huddled over a satellite internet connection in Elias's workshop. "When I worked at the firm, I discovered Scarpello's money laundering operation was run through a ghost server, a digital dead drop. The transaction for the gun sale to Marco Gallo would have been logged there. I was locked out after I was framed, but I know the architecture of the system. I know its back doors." For the next 24 hours, Maya didn't sleep. With Kaelin standing guard, she launched a quiet, methodical assault on the law firm's servers. It was a digital siege. She wrote code on the fly, bypassed security protocols, and navigated a labyrinth of firewalls designed by corporate security experts. It was here that Elena Petrova, the brilliant paralegal, truly came back to life. She was relentless, her fingers flying across the keyboard, her mind holding a 3-dimensional map of the digital fortress she was invading. Finally, with a soft click, she was in. She found the hidden partition, the ghost server. And there it was, a single line item in an encrypted ledger, a wire transfer from a known Scarpello Shell Corporation to her father's business account. The date was 1 month before the murder. The memo line contained a purchase order number, and when she cross-referenced it with a digitized copy of her father's records that Elias had kept, it matched perfectly. The purchase order was for one custom Volkov V9 pistol. She had it, the gun, the maker's mark, and the digital receipt. A perfect, unbreakable chain of evidence that led from Vincent Scarpello's bank account directly to the weapon that had murdered David Vance. "He's hosting a party," Kaelin said, his voice grim. He'd been monitoring Scarpello's movements. "A victory celebration at his new restaurant in Chicago, celebrating his acquittal. The mayor will be there, the press, half the city's elite." Maya looked at the screen, at the irrefutable proof she had assembled. A slow, cold smile spread across her face. "Perfect," she whispered. "He wants an audience? We'll give him one." The vulture's nest was the epitome of opulent arrogance. Perched atop a Chicago skyscraper, the restaurant was a testament to Vincent Scarpello's power, a declaration that he was untouchable. Tonight, it was filled with the city's most influential figures, all there to pay tribute to the man who had once again slipped through the grasp of the law. Scarpello stood near the panoramic windows, a glass of champagne in his hand, basking in the glow of his own invincibility. He was a king in his court, accepting congratulations, his face a mask of smug triumph. He never noticed the new sommelier, a handsome man with stormy eyes who moved with an unnerving grace, ensuring every glass remained full. Nor did he pay any attention to the stunning blonde in the red dress, a late addition to the catering staff's tech support team, who was quietly connecting her laptop to the restaurant's main AV control panel in a back room. At 10 o'clock, Scarpello tapped a glass for attention. A hush fell over the crowd. He was about to give his victory speech. "My friends," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "They say that justice is blind. Tonight, I am proof that sometimes she sees the truth." As he spoke, the massive video screens behind him, which had been displaying images of the Chicago skyline, flickered. For a second, they went black. Scarpello faltered, annoyed at the technical glitch. Then the screens came to life. It wasn't the skyline. It was a high-resolution, microscopic image of the inside of a gun barrel. A string of numbers was clearly visible. 5 years ago, a woman's voice echoed through the restaurant's powerful sound system, amplified, clear, and cold as ice. It was Maya's voice. Federal prosecutor David Vance was murdered in his office. On the screen, the image changed to Elias Thorne's sworn affidavit. The weapon was a custom Volkov V9 pistol, a unique firearm made by my father. Scarpello's face went white. His men started moving through the crowd, but Kalen was already there, subtly blocking their path, a silent, deadly obstacle. "I was framed for that murder," Maya's voice continued, as the screen now displayed her old paralegal ID next to the Bolo alert. "My fingerprints were on the gun because it was mine, a gift." The final image appeared, and a collective gasp went through the room. It was the ledger page from the Ghost server. The wire transfer, the purchase order number, the name of the shell corporation, and the recipient, all highlighted in red. But 1 month before the murder, that gun was sold to Marco Gallo, a known enforcer for Vincent Scarpello. This is the receipt, paid for from a slush fund controlled by the man standing before you. The evidence was simple, direct, and devastating. The room was utterly silent, every eye fixed on Scarpello, whose mask of triumph had crumbled into a snarl of pure hatred. He stared at the screen, at the digital ghost of his crime laid bare for the world to see. "This is a lie, a fabrication!" he roared, but his voice lacked conviction. The full unencrypted data packet, including this presentation, was just sent to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI's Cybercrime Division, and every major news outlet in the country. Maya's voice concluded, calm and final. "Your war is over, Vincent. You just lost." At that moment, the glass doors to the restaurant burst open. FBI agents, led by a grim-faced Sheriff Brody, swarmed in. The partygoers screamed, diving for cover. Scarpello's reign, built on fear and shadows, evaporated in the glare of 1,000 camera flashes and the cold, hard light of undeniable truth. 1 year later, the Fork in the Road diner had been rebuilt. A little newer, a little cleaner, but with the same lukewarm coffee. A new waitress wiped down the counters. She paid no mind to the faint, almost invisible discoloration on the formica, the ghost of an old stain that no amount of scrubbing could ever truly remove. Thousands of miles away, in a quiet office in Washington, D.C., Elena Petrova looked out over the city. The name on the door read, "The David Vance Justice Initiative, a non-profit funded by the Vance family fortune." Kalen stood beside her, no longer a hunter, but a guardian. They didn't fix the system. They worked outside of it, finding the cases that fell through the cracks, helping the people the law had forgotten. Vincent Scarpello would spend the rest of his life in a supermax prison, a vulture locked in a cage of his own making. Sheriff Brody had been given a commendation, though he still claimed the whole affair had taken 5 years off his life. Elena picked up a new case file from her desk, a young man in Louisiana framed by a corrupt corporation. A familiar story. She felt the old fear, the ghost of Maya Jensen, flicker within her. But it no longer had any power. She was no longer hiding, no longer running. She had walked through the fire and discovered that the person on the other side was stronger than she had ever imagined. She had gone to the desert to erase a past that was stained with guilt, only to find that you can't wipe away who you are. You can only become it